Okay, hi guys, welcome to this week's video to support you with your homework task, which will of course in turn support you with revision for the mock examination. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to be looking at an extract from Frankenstein and trying to analyse that and also relate it to what we know about the wider novel. So as we do that, we're going to start by thinking about three quotations from the text, and we're also going to look beyond that maybe to three gold quotations. What you'll need for this is your homework booklet, and you'll also need your sort of Frankenstein gold only handout. So where do we start? Well, we always start with the question. In starting with this extract, write about how Shelley, just draw attention to that E there that everyone misses out, presents life and death. Okay, so life and death, really great question if you got this. It's very broad. We might think in terms of life, in terms of creation, okay, and obviously what it means to be alive, okay, well, perhaps healthy, those kinds of things. With creation, obviously the idea of life, the idea of God and playing God comes through, and obviously with with death we have the idea of darkness, potentially, and if we've got God, we might also perhaps think of the devil as the opposite of that, and of course Victor is, if you like, seeking the secrets of life, okay, and that sort of brings us along to ideas to do with possibly the idea of science, you know, and nature, and how far Victor pushes things, and possibly even science versus nature. And if we think about that, we might also think about some of those romantics and their ideas that they had some concerns about the push for science. Sorry, just put that into focus for you. So we've got that. In terms of the extract itself, I don't want to give you as much help as I did previously. It's your job to have a read through this. I'll highlight a couple of things that might be of interest without using the language term. You have a look through your books and back through your text and see if you can recall some of these things. But if, for example, we look at churchyard, where presumably there are graves, the idea of dark, bodies deprived of life, and perhaps decay, and also vaults, which is another word for tomb, and charnel houses, which are kind of like a storage place for death. You know, there are lots of things that we might call that phrase, GM. Look in your notes, you have it there. There is this image across the middle of the idea of beauty and strength had become food for the worm, and you might want to explore the idea that, you know, worms are eating beauty and strength, and that's a bit metaphorical perhaps. And then later in the extract, as soon as you see things like this, death to life, life to death, from the midst of this darkness a sudden light broke in, surely there you are at the point where you recognise some of those when you see them. And also one word that was new to Frankenstein, which I'll give you, that idea of liminality, the borderline between life and death. And Shelley certainly presents life and death as something that perhaps you can cross, something that is related and is not as separate as we might think. So that should be a good starting point for some ideas and some annotations there. In terms of then your gold quotations, obviously so far we've looked at a few things. We're up to chapter 5. We have a look in here. My candle was nearly burnt out. If you explore that, I think you'll see some ideas. And what I really need you to do this time is to be thinking not just about downloading that information about the gold quotation, but what is it about that gold quotation that explores life and death, and how can you link that through. And similarly, lower down, Victor's idea that he might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. They are both from chapter 5. I perhaps should have mentioned, of course, one of your jobs is to work out where the extract is. This extract is from chapter 4, just as Victor is, if you like, you know, he's bringing his studies to a climax. He hasn't quite created the creature, but he's pretty much there in terms of the theory. If you really wanted to challenge yourself, you can look ahead to sections we haven't read. If we look at this gold quotation here, we've mentioned this briefly, but the idea, I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather thy fallen angel. Of course, Adam is the human that God gave life to, and so So that idea of life and death as being perhaps something biblical, something godlike in the ability to give it to people. And then, of course, the creature thinks that he has perhaps become more devilish. So if you really wanted to challenge yourself, look ahead and see if you can sort of decode those gold quotations that we haven't covered yet. Once you've done that, I think, you're invited to write a paragraph. The best people last time wrote 2 paragraphs. So I think, if you want to challenge yourself, you should definitely write a peel paragraph based on something in the extract that's not a gold quotation, because that is the thing that varies every time. But if you do have the time, try and write a paragraph on a gold quotation as well. What I would say is don't just write about gold quotations. You do need to get into the habit of trying to analyse things that you haven't seen, things from extracts. So that's the end of this video. As they say, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want some advice on a peel paragraph, there is another video on the site that Miss Mulholland did regarding how to develop a Frankenstein paragraph. I'm not going to provide that because I won't do it as well, and also she's on like 1,000+ likes, and I'm sure she'd like a few more. So do have a look at that video if you need help with developing your peel paragraphs. Good luck.